Welcome to Politics for Thinkers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jennifer Barreto Leiva. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being so patient with me. It's been 3 weeks since the earthquakes in Venezuela. And as I've said in the editorial of the week last week, I was born all over again. This is a very unique experience. You don't have rules to guide you and let you know what you should do, how you should handle your emotions. So I'm absolutely grateful for being here, for being alive, and also for being able to be with all of you through this leader screen that we share every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This week, I have a very nice and beautiful guest. She's part of the Transition Justice Platform. I'm going to tell you what is Transition Justice, what they do, and how they got the idea of creating this platform. If you hear about gender ideology, if you hear about the sex affirmation care, which is nothing but chopping healthy bodies and give hormones for the rest of their life, you should stick around. If you have underage kids, if you have friends, even if they are adults, that are transitioning, if you have around you people that is transitioning or is considering transitioning, please stick around and hear carefully this conversation that we will have today. So let me introduce you my guest of this week. This week, I have with me Martha Schultz. She's part of Justice. Transition Justice puts those harmed by gender medicine in touch with legal professionals. They do not offer legal advice and not. They don't offer information on their website. The website, you will find it on the info box of the episode of this week. This is a project created by Partners for Ethical Care, a secular, nonpartisan, all volunteer grassroots nonprofit organization comprised of individuals from across the globe. We come across the political spectrum and put difference aside to work toward a common mission. We are funded by individual donors and we are humbled by their generosity. You can find all the info about Transition Justice on transitionjustice.org. Welcome, Martha. Thank you so much for being with me today and be kind enough to share this hour of conversation.
Thank you.
So, Marta, the first question I have: how can you manage to put together all these resources that you offer through Transition Justice and make it like it's kind of a platform that you have?
Yeah. So what we have, what we call the Transition Justice Project, because Partners for Ethical Care is the legal organization, and what we formed in 2020 to try to shed light on the medical abuse that's going on for especially among children and young adults,
Hmm.
and in the case of young adults in particular, these are autistic or kids who have other mental illness typically. So it's really abuse of children and the vulnerable. So that was our mission starting in 2020. In the middle of the pandemic, we got together, and since that time, we knew we helped. We have helped pass legislation in 10 different states across the United States to at least stop these procedures on minors. And what we would also like to do is extend the statute of limitations for medical malpractice for these procedures, because in most states in the US, you only have a few years to bring a malpractice claim. And because the statute of limitations limits how long people can pursue their doctors or hospitals for negligence or abuse in this case, we feel like this is more than negligence. It's recklessness, it's intentional harm. But it's most people have no recourse because by the time these victims realize what happened to them, it's usually several years later. By definition, they're always mentally vulnerable and they just don't realize it, until they start to grow up, get a little older, have a little more maturity, or they get treated for whatever underlying mental condition they have. Then they start to say, hey, wait a second. In many cases, people realize it after they had surgery because it's a sudden change and it wakes them up and they realize this didn't really make me better, it's making me worse. So that's really what we wanted to do, was change the laws. And we knew, though, that was going to be an uphill battle. And it's been incredibly hard because you have the pharmaceutical lobby, you have certain nonprofit groups like Human Rights Campaign, GLAAD, GLISTEN, all Amnesty International, groups that you would not think have any interest in this. And still, they all seem to want people to transition. They push it. And school groups, I mean, it's amazing how many people and industries, because you have tangential industries such as surrogacy, you have sex trafficking, you have porn. All of these industries profit from the gender machine. So they all have their own benefits that they get out of this. Not to mention just the egos of some of these doctors who just want to play God, and they pretend they can change a man from a woman and vice versa. So you have so many people with a stake that even in the states that are more conservative, it's an uphill battle because so many of the legislators have been compromised. They've been bought off by these industries. So it's been miserable. So we decided the only way we think will probably make a difference, or the main way, is to bring lawsuits. So we tried, for the first 2 years, we couldn't find any lawyers to help detransitioners, for example. And that's our main group that needs help, are detransitioners and parents who've lost their children. Because if their children are still alive, usually the child is 18 and the parents can't do anything on their behalf. They can't stop the child once they reach their 18th birthday from accessing any of these horrible treatments. But in many cases, it's fatal. So the child dies and the parents, they have to do something, and in most of the cases that with the parents we help, all those parents didn't want their children to transition. They were very much against it. They worked to try to stop it. Sometimes, they would call the doctors. They'd go to their office, say, please don't do this to my child. He's mentally ill. He cannot make this decision for himself. And the doctors did it anyway. So then that child either dies by suicide or by some other complication, such as a pulmonary embolism. That's pretty common. So with these drugs, for boys in particular, girls, they tend to have more long-term damage, but it happens slowly. So, well, not that, actually at the first, it happens fast. Like their voice changes very quickly, and that you can never get back. You can't get a female voice once you have a male voice. It's very difficult. If they didn't take testosterone for very long, sometimes they can do a whole lot of vocal training and they can get back at least part of their voice. But most of the time, most of it is there for good. And so the parents will never hear their daughter's voice again. So it's really, really sad. And it's horrific for parents and for the children once they come out of this spell. It really is. It's like a spell. It's like they became indoctrinated and they can't wake up. It's a cult, really. So
this.
I was going to say you had asked how do we do it, and I will tell you, it's been so hard. I mean, we have been working for years just to try to find lawyers who will help, and we finally in 2020, the same year that a lot of legislation was passed, and where I am in Texas, we passed a bill at that time to stop the minor transitions. At that same time, we met four young lawyers who just decided they wanted to help detransitioners. They read about it, they had seen some videos, and they said, we have to do something. And these are four Christian guys. They're amazing, and they gave up lucrative law practices to come in and help detransitioners. And it's been a godsend, but they have not had an easy time. And one of them passed away last year because he had cancer. And it's just been horrible because they're all young and they're all dads, So it's just been heartbreaking. But at the same time, what they're doing is so amazing. And we work with them on most of our cases. And the firm is called Campbell Miller Payne. And then they go out and they find local counsel in other parts of the U.S. and they assist in the case. So they have the expertise now in these lawsuits, and then they find a good medical malpractice lawyer in the place where the detransitioner or parents are, and they advise the local counsel on. And so far, only one case has gone to trial, and this one didn't come through transition justice. She found the lawyer in New York on her own, and this was the Fox Varian case, which made big headlines. Even made headlines here, even though most media never talks about this stuff in the U.S. They rarely do. If they ever do, it's always on the side of trans activists, never on our side. So this was a big deal that somebody finally had their lawsuit that actually went to trial, and she won. And our lawyers here in Dallas went to New York and helped with that case. So we feel like that was a big reason that girl was able to win some damages, was because of them. And for everyone, they get better and better for everyone they do. So we've had, let's see, I think they've settled 5 cases now, and they've been very good settlements. So one case they settled was a case in Tennessee of a young guy who committed suicide. And he was only in his early 20s, and he was very ill. He had schizophrenia, all kinds of illness, and the parents were pleading with doctors. Of course, he read about this stuff online because that's where most boys find it. Girls sometimes find it with their friends at school, or on social media. Boys typically find it always on the internet somewhere. And this boy did, and he was convinced he would be happy, if he took cross-sex hormones. So he was miserable, and he got even worse once he took the hormones. So the parents were going to the doctors and saying, this is not helping, can you please stop? Even in his case, even the insurance company said to the doctors, this doesn't seem like it makes any sense, because this young man has been so mentally ill. Are you sure this is the right thing? But insurance usually goes along with it. So, you can't get really life-saving care because the insurance companies don't want to pay for it. But when you get something like this, they go ahead. And it's a long story as to why that's the case, but they are in bed with the pharmaceutical providers. A lot of times they're under common ownership. So they're helping the pharmaceutical providers by continuing to cover these horrible treatments. And so that boy eventually committed suicide, and the parents took those doctors to court. So that's where we are, and we have several suicides now. We have also a wrongful death suit for a pulmonary embolism, and then many, many detrans cases.
My goodness. When I was listening to you, I've remember this story I've heard about a woman in Chile. She transitioned to be a man. This lobby take her when she was 16, I think, according to her story. And now her body that was actually perfectly healthy is all
Yeah.
chopped. She has hormone. Her voice, what you said
Yeah.
about her voice, horrible. She says, I now have daily migraines on a daily
Yes.
basis. I need to take medicine for avoiding an embolia. I cannot go to the bathroom. I cannot have sexual pleasure. I'm sorry, but I have to say this is
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
part of the whole picture. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm cranky all the time. I hate my body. Now I have more body dysmorphia and
Oh,
a
yeah.
bunch of things that you do not realize.
Yeah.
And how ironic they call this affirming care when they do
Exactly.
not care at all about the
Exactly.
consequences. So
Right.
she now can do a thing, and now she's an activist. She called herself a man. I totally respect that
Yeah.
because it's a very sensitive
Oh,
situation,
yeah.
and
What she's
now
been through, it's terrible. And she can't go back.
absolutely. Absolutely. So now she helps other kids and teenagers and even adults to not fall into this. She
Yeah.
cannot do anything legally. And that's the next question that I want to ask you. When I find your work as platform, you kind of get me back a little bit of hope in humanity. As a lawyer, I know how hard it is to deal with the medical field. We never win anything with them. They are so strong as a community, and
Absolutely.
it's almost impossible to win a case with them.
Yeah.
How do you deal with this on a daily basis?
Well, that's the hard thing is that in many cases, like I said, we've only had one case that went to trial, but many cases could not go to trial because, or they tried, the law firm tried in two cases of little girls in California, little girls who were transitioned from the time they were 12 or 13 years old. They were thrown out of court because the court said, well, you should have known, you passed your statute of limitations, and our law firm said they were children. They couldn't have brought a lawsuit before. They were minors. Well, then their parents should have brought it. Well, of course, the parents went along with it because doctors told the parents it was going to help their children. So, and the child and the parents thought that's what would make their child happy. By the time, it's almost always by the time they're, 18, 19, 20, 25, something like that, that the kids even grow out of it. One of these little girls did, Chloe Cole, who's pretty well known, she grew out of it. She realized when she was 17 that 2 years after she had a mastectomy, and she'd already been on testosterone, and she realized it was wrong. But at that time, it was really hard because we didn't ask her about filing a lawsuit. She came to us, and we were afraid to do anything because we didn't want to turn her against her parents, because it would have sort of implicated her parents, and because they went along with the whole thing. So we wanted to wait till she was 18 before saying anything, but somebody else found her first. So her law firm in California found her when she was going with us to testify, and they took her case, and the court said, oh, it's too late, you should have filed this lawsuit long ago. But and there was an arbitration provision in her, if you can believe it, in her medical insurance, which most states that's not even legal. You can't force a patient to arbitrate, but in California they allow it. So Kaiser is the owner of the hospital where they did her mastectomy and did all this treatment, and they said, it's too late. She has to go to arbitration with us, and in arbitration, they basically own everybody in California. So they knew they weren't going to win on arbitration. But a judge there said there was a technicality when her mother signed up for the insurance. Something wasn't signed, so the arbitration provision does not bind her. So now Chloe is able to pursue her case in court finally, and it's been like 5 years. It took that long to get through the courts just to allow her to be able to go to trial. So we're hoping and praying it's going to trial next year, like 2027. And we just hope she wins a huge verdict because she's her life has changed forever because of decisions she made when she was 13, 14, 15 years old. So yeah, we deal with this all the time, and the California courts so far have thrown out two other little girls
My goodness.
cases, and so we're appealing and saying, the statute of limitations should not apply to these children.
Now that you mentioned Chloe Cole, this she has a very interesting story, and the fact that she has been so proactive towards this, it shows how brave she is, because
Yeah,
it's not easy to step back on
no,
your feet after all she went through. She proposed a federal legislation called the Chloe Cole Act, and is seeking that medical professionals permanently prohibit hospital and clinics from providing chemical or surgical gender affirming care to minors. But this is extensive, as you just mentioned. Even if time has passed, you still be able to do some legal action towards
yeah.
this. Do you think that eventually this Chloe Cole Act, it is a possibility that we can make it happen in the entire country, in every state, in every possible way? United States, it sometimes is very complicated when it
Oh
comes to legal
yeah,
matters.
yeah.
There is a way to make some kind of a bubble that we can
A federal
protect every
statute.
single
Yeah,
kid, and
yeah.
yeah,
That's what we
something like
need.
that.
That's what we need. But the problem
Yeah.
is, first of all, most of us, even though we desperately want that act to pass, we are concerned that it won't because even some of the Republican senators, I mean, it is all Republican senators who are pushing it, but even a few of them are controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, and so they don't want that to pass. Also, it's not really going to change the worst thing, which the worst abuse happens between the ages of 18 and 26, because that's when the children are able to do everything without their parents, yet their brains are not mature. So that's where the industry targets the most, is the children of that age. They target them as small children, younger children, but they can't do anything if their parents stop it. That's the thing. So you have parents to protect you till you're 18. Even now, in some states, that's not even true. In Washington, California, Oregon, they allow minors to do this without their parents' consent. But at least, it's horrible, isn't it? But at least parents have some hope because if they know their child is getting into this stuff, and we've seen it happen, they can move to another state. They can leave and take their child. But if you're 18, if the child's 18, you can't do anything. So that's where the most damage happens. And most of the gruesome surgeries, like a lot of mastectomies, happen to children, like Chloe and these other Clementine and Layla Jane and these other girls who had this stuff as minors. Many, many children have mastectomies. The gender industry pretends that's not true, but they do, because we've talked to a ton of them. But the more gruesome surgeries, which is the vaginoplasties and the phalloplasties, so that's bottom surgery, those they usually don't do it until you're 18. But what 18-year-old, can make a decision to completely, desex, to be desexed? How can anybody make that decision for themselves? It doesn't make any sense. It's not even treatment. It's just disfigurement. So we have seen so many kids who did this kind of thing when they were 18, 19, 20. And, by the time a few years later, they say, what did I do? I had no idea. And one young man, or he's not young anymore, Corinna Cohn, now they call him Corey, but Corinna started as, he was a trans woman and one of the early ones. So he's now about 50 or so. And when he was 18 years old, he was a sweet, shy, autistic little gay boy. He just thought he was supposed to be a girl because people told him, you're effeminate, you might not find a boyfriend because gay guys like a big strong guy, and you're kind of effeminate. And so he listened to that, and they did everything to him when he was 19 years old, all the surgery. He had never had sex in his life. How could he possibly know what he was giving up? And he says now, he looks back, now he's basically detransitioned as much as he can. But he says, if I had known at the time what sex was about, I would never have, I can't imagine I would consent. But he said, I was an autistic 18-year-old. How could I know? He had no idea. He'd never had any kind of sexual experience. And kids nowadays, a lot of times, do not until they're older. It's much different than it used to be. So most of these kids who are even in their mid-20s, many have never had a sex life because they're autistic. They're in a different frame of, it's just different for them. Mm-hmm. So these people, and sometimes that's why they seek it out, because they don't understand sex. They're kind of creeped out by the idea. So they seek these treatments thinking that they'll feel better. And that maybe the reason, that it's scary to them is because they're in the wrong body. Well, of course, that's not true. It's because they're autistic, and they need help just kind of getting through the maturity. And this is the group of kids that all this legislation like the Chloe Cole Act won't even help, because they were already 18 when the worst damage happened to them. The way it usually works is they are groomed as children. So, by the internet or by the schools or something, to start thinking this way. And then by the time they're 18, the gender industry has their opening, and they can get those kids. And the kids and the parents are helpless. That's what is the travesty here, is that it's not a children's thing only. It's a whole lifetime of grooming people, grooming society to think that this is okay. That it's like my friend, one of our co-founders is in Israel, Alex, and she always says when people say things like, well, transition is okay for some people, she said that's kind of like saying slavery is okay for some people. It's not really okay. You can't really consent to being a slave. So think about it. No one should be enslaved. And yet we're saying it's okay to desex people because they have an 18th birthday. It makes no sense. So that is one of my crusades, I would say, is making people understand that this is so much more than children, that the children are the tip of the iceberg, because they hook the children, but you can pass all the laws in the world about not transitioning minors. And the second that minor turns 18, they'll do exactly what Prisha Mosley did, if you've ever seen her talk about it. She went on her 18th birthday to get a mastectomy for her as her birthday present. And now she's 26. She was lucky enough to be able to, she has a baby now, but it's just been horrible for her because she got terribly depressed. She couldn't breastfeed the child, of course, because she had a mastectomy. And all these things happened to her, and she still has a lot of issues, and she's the sweetest girl ever. And it's just not right. It's just not right to take a child. She had every mental illness in the book, eating disorders. She had what they call borderline personality, all kinds of conditions that she could not be informed about what she was doing. And her parents couldn't protect her from it. So that's what we have to stop, is the industry itself. Just like you have to stop slavery, you have to stop it. What if we had passed a law in the Civil War of the United States that said, slaves were okay as long as you were over 18? That wouldn't really help the problems we have.
Yeah. Can agree more with the argument you just the way you explain yourself. I have a personal story. This issue affects me personally. I was sharing with Marta of air my story. I had this friend long time ago. He said one day, Jennifer, I have a secret I would like to share with you. I like to dress as a woman. I was like, this is none of my business, but if you feel better telling me, thank you for trusting in me. And he says, I'm just experimenting about this. Don't get worried. I'm doing this just in the privacy of home. And to make long story short, he kept growing this interest on being a woman. He began to take hormones on his own, but he begins to surround, he and his wife, to surround with people that is related to this lobby. And he knew that I wasn't agreeing with this because I knew all of this, and I do not want them to suffer as a couple and him as an individual all of these consequences. So this lobby convinced him. He is a grown man, he's 40 something. This lobby convinced him that I was the enemy, that I was a monster, and to make long story short, now I'm not his friend anymore. They cut me as a friend. So it's not only they convince you to chop a perfectly healthy body, to have hormones for the rest of your life, to create something that you're not, because biology doesn't lie, but also they make you believe that whoever is not agreeing with you is your enemy. And I mean, with an adult, you sort of know what you're doing. Sometimes you don't, but
Yeah.
when you do this to a child and a teenager, especially if it's someone who with a mental condition, this is diabolical. There is a way to press charges, or to file a law action against someone with in a situation like this, or is just more to the medical field?
Yeah, it's really hard because you can only sue like the doctors, the therapists, the hospital,
Mm.
but the person who's the victim has to file the lawsuit. And that's why they've been so successful, is because the victims in this case are incompetent. They cannot make decisions for themselves. They clearly are not capable of giving informed consent to any of these treatments. Otherwise, they wouldn't be seeking them, right? So that's the thing. One of our detransitioners, she was going by Kat Cattinson for a while, and she had written a blog post for us several years ago, and she stated in it, doctors pretend that we made the decision, that it was because we were adults when this happened in her case. We consented to these treatments. But she said anybody who would seek these treatments is by definition not competent to consent to them, because you're clearly not well. Nobody wants healthy body parts taken off unless there's something wrong. And there are many diseases like that. There are people who, and I can't remember the name of the illness, but it's a really long one. People who want their legs, amputated, or their arm, or they want to be made blind. It's real, and those people, they want to be disabled. But we don't see doctors going out and making a lot of money amputating arms and legs or making people blind. Nobody thinks that's okay. But why is it okay to desex them? Why is it okay to take off other body parts? That's what I don't understand. How can any of this be okay with anybody, no matter who the victim is? Because the victim is, by definition, not well, not well at all. So this is the problem. But the lawsuits will be the way we stop it. It's the only way, because these doctors are going to have to get so many damages filed that they have to pay out, or their insurance has to pay out, that they won't be able to get insurance coverage anymore, and then they won't do it. That's what we have. That's the best we have, because our legislators all over the world, by the way, Jennifer, every country so far is like this. There's too many legislators who are benefiting from the pharma lobby, hospital lobby, they're not going to do it. That's why I really was hopeful with when President Trump took office, because 2 years before he even ran for president again, he said this gender stuff has to stop. It's not right for any age. And since he's been in office, it seems like some people are stopping him from going after all of it. That yes, he's been very strong about stopping it for minors, but you can't stop it for one group and not others, because the minors will access it, and that's what's happened. So in Texas, we passed a law against minor transitions 3 years ago now. Well, Ken Paxton, our Attorney General, has filed several lawsuits recently because adult clinics are transitioning children. That's all they do, is they just change where they go. They don't have an office in the children's hospital anymore. But even some still do that, but they say they'll only take people 18 to 26. But it's funny because most of the time, if you're over 18, you're not in the children's hospital anyway, or over 19 or 20. But the gender clinics at these hospitals, oh yes, they go up to age 26 because they want to get those children in the door, before they're adults, so that they can push all this stuff on them. So they lure them in. They have these pretty, colorful gender clinics in the children's hospital, and they get you as soon as you turn 18, whether you like it or not. And there's so many out there that are fighting against this, and a lot of times in a few conservative outlets, you'll see, because that's the only people who really talk about what's going on are conservative groups, and some will say, well, these parents are going along with it, and I'm telling you, it's not the parents. There are parents, absolutely, and I know some of them, and I'm appalled, who will go along with these things, and I think there's something wrong with those parents also. But the parents couldn't make it happen without the doctors. It's the doctors who are doing the abuse. The parents are just, a few of them are going along for social credit. Who knows? I just don't get it. I cannot imagine being okay as a mother saying you're going to take my child and de-sex him or her. I can't. But there are people who will. That's why you have to stop the doctors, because the parents, you don't have to get a license to be a parent. Any idiot can be a parent. But these doctors have licenses, and they're supposed to be treating people, not making them worse.
You have no idea the long network of enablers this industry has. I
Yep.
had the opportunity to interview a group of mothers from California in 2020, and the show was so emotional that I have to tell them, you know what? Go cry all what you want. We will now show this on video. Let's record just the audio. Let's do some therapy here after recording the show. Don't you worry. It was the first time that they did an interview, and one of
Wow.
them was telling me the principal of the school was transitioning my daughter behind my back,
Yep.
and they didn't let me into the school not to pick her up.
Yeah.
There was another mother that was telling me they were accusing my son of being a hater towards homosexual community because he was against another boy harassing him. He says, I'm straight, I don't like
Yeah.
you as a man, and I don't have to like you as a man.
Yeah.
The principal of the other school was an enabler as well of this situation. They have no one to talk about. No one believed them. They were all single mothers trying to earn as much as they could to keep their kids alive, and it was a very, very, very difficult situation to talk about. Thank goodness they all are safe. They went through mental help, and
Yeah.
good. Thank goodness everything is get over it. It's a matter of the past right now, but
Thank goodness.
they were so modified. One of them was moving to another state because she was so desperate about the
Mm-hmm.
enablers about this lobby.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
horrific, Marta.
It is. We have had so many families leaving the West Coast, leaving the East Coast, leaving Illinois. One of my partners in Partners for Ethical Care, Jeanette Cooper, she has been on Fox News and some other shows, and a lot of different outlets have interviewed her because she lost custody of her daughter in Chicago when her daughter was not even 13 years old. Um, Her ex-husband and the husband's new wife, who was a therapist, told the little girl she must really be a boy. And my friend Jeanette said, there is nothing boyish about this girl. She was the most girly girl you could ever imagine. Beautiful, long dark hair. She was super smart. And that's the sad thing, is most of these kids are very, very intelligent. But the problem is when you get to a certain level of intelligence, you're able to be influenced in strange ways. That's what we have found, is that you can think outside the box, so you don't understand, whereas a normal person knows male and female are two different things and you can't change. These people, they create constructs in their mind that allow them to think that's real, so they think outside of reality. And Jeanette's little girl was one of those. And the courts of Illinois took that child away from her. So now the little girl is 19. She's spoken to Jeanette once or twice. And they were able to keep her purely because they said her mother doesn't support her transition. And Jeanette said at the time she didn't know near as much as she knows now. So she said at the time, I would call her a boy name and things because I just wanted to keep her. Just didn't want to lose her. But she knew it was wrong. She just said, I would do whatever I could do to keep my child, but it didn't matter just because they knew, her daughter knew that she knew better. She knew her mother. Her mother was a radical feminist. So Jeanette was a radical feminist, meaning if you're a radical feminist, you do not go for gender ideology because it's about women's rights. And her mother had been, a women's rights activist. So the child, she said, my mom's never going to go for this. And the courts said, okay, then you don't have to go home. And it was just the saddest thing because think about what that girl missed out on. That was her mother. She's the only child. She wouldn't even speak to her grandpa. She was his only grandchild. And he would call her and she would say, he has to call me by a different name. And her grandpa didn't know, he didn't really understand. So he also didn't get to see his only grandchild. It is diabolical. It really is the most evil thing.
Absolutely. There are so many side consequences of this. They somehow kill your child, they chop your child, they make your child be full of hormones until their last day of their lives.
Yeah.
They break your child into pieces. They make your child see you as the enemy. And
Mm-hmm.
the suicides, something that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
The gender ideology lobby says the kids that needs to be into this transition process are more subtle of killing themselves, which is not real. The reality of this, the hormones make them be more aggressive and
Yeah.
more fragile in order
Mm-hmm.
to take their lives away. That's
Yeah.
the reality. And that's
Yeah.
why they don't
That's
say.
right. Yeah. So what we see is with when girls take a whole lot of testosterone. Of course, girls need some testosterone. So all females have it in their system. We both have hormones of the other, but in the appropriate amounts. And when a girl takes male dose testosterone, she becomes often very impulsive, very angry. It affects her differently than it would a guy. A guy could have a lot more testosterone and still not suffer those same effects. Um, but a girl will have a lot of rage. And with boys, it's interesting because we also see when boys take estrogen, The estrogen itself may not change their mood as much, but they are usually prescribed spironolactone with it, which is a testosterone blocker. That can make a boy extremely depressed, extremely depressed. So then they also suffer a lot of rage too, because just from their being so depressed all the time. So you see similar outcomes, even though they're different hormones causing it, because it's all against what your body is supposed to have. So that's what's going to happen if you put somebody's body totally out of balance. Of course, it's going to have unintended consequences, and that's why we have seen these kids. And I think too, first of all, when you have a child who has this kind of transgender ideation, they are always mentally ill in some way, whether it's autism, depression, OCD, whatever. So they are more likely to commit suicide simply because they already have something going on. But the problem is that medicating them with cross-sex hormones is just going to aggravate that. Instead of trying to help them figure out what's going on and treating maybe an underlying condition, such as Lyme disease, that can cause your brain to act different. I mean, my daughter has Lyme. She's not trans-identified, but it changes her personality, because it affects your brain. And concussions affect your brain. So a lot of kids have had a concussion and then they'll start acting differently. So the problem is nobody's treating those underlying conditions. So these kids are much more likely to go on and be suicidal because they're not getting any help. They're getting something making them worse, like you say.
And when it comes to the organizations that support this kind of horror, the one you think is not involved, trust me, it is involved.
Yeah.
For my surprise, Planet Parenthood, who do abortions, they are extremely involved in this.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely.
Oh, yeah.
So, and they contribute in every possible way, not only with money,
Absolutely.
but with surgeries and hormones and everything as well in presence. So
Oh,
it
yeah.
is horrific.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the easiest places to go to get cross-sex hormones is so many of our detransitioners had gone there and they never saw a doctor. I mean, they just walked in and they said, I think, or they even were on the phone during the pandemic. They didn't even make them come in. They would just prescribe hormones over the phone and say, oh, you think you're trans and, here you go. I mean, literally, here you go. And they had to learn to inject themselves. It was just very irresponsible. So all these kids are shooting up these drugs and it's perfectly fine. And now they have, now you don't even have to go to Planned Parenthood because you can order it on the internet from Plume or Folks. Those are two online hormone mills. Anybody can go and say, I can guarantee you, Jennifer, if you called Plume, you filled out a form online and said, I think I'm a trans man, you would walk away with a prescription that day. They would mail it to your local Walgreens or whatever your, pharmacy is. You wouldn't have to change the way you look, the way you act, nothing. You are one of our members. In fact, the Israeli, Alex, when she was in the U.S., she went into a Planned Parenthood and she had on a pink sweater and she has fancy manicures and long blonde hair. And she said, I think I'm a male, do you think I could get some testosterone? And they said, oh, yes. They never questioned her. We have a mother. She is so funny. She's really a strong one. You should follow her if you haven't seen her online presence, but it's Beth Bourne, Bourne. She's in California. Her daughter was trying to transition. And she was another one who lost custody of her daughter for that reason. But thank God in her case and my friend Jeanette's case, the children did not go on to take hormones. But this little girl, her dad was supporting her in the hormones. So her dad got custody and she was 17, but then thank God she decided not to take them. But so Beth, the mother, who was 53, she wrote to the same doctor and she said, my daughter, you were able to give her testosterone, or a prescription for testosterone. I feel like I'm non-binary. Do you think I could get that too? And they said, oh, yes, just fill out these forms. And she has it all recorded where They prescribed her testosterone. She never saw anybody. She did it all online at UC Davis, I think is University of California at Davis. And then she said, well, what about, I really am uncomfortable having breasts. Um, what about that? And they said, oh, we'll write you a letter for a mastectomy. And this is a woman who'd been a woman and a mother her whole life, you know. But nope, she was able to immediately get all this stuff. So I love Beth because she goes to a lot of protests, and a lot of trans activists threaten her, and you know she's always recording them, but they hate her. They hate her because she exposes all these people.
That's my kind of girl.
Yeah, you like her. And it's crazy because her daughter still won't speak to her.
Wow.
But she says, you know what? At least maybe I can help somebody else.
Yeah. That's the way she does some therapy somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Marta, we have just a few minutes, but you mentioned something that it's been in my mind since we started this conversation. The state in every corner of the world have the power to remove the custody of your children if you do not agree to do the transition or to sign for the transition. Canada is one of those places.
Yeah.
Do you think that Australia too, you're right. Do you think that eventually as lawyers there's something we will be able to do something about that?
Yeah, and right now I think the Trump administration, I think there's a families section in the Health and Human Services, and they have passed some regulations regarding that. Sadly, you know, the federal government doesn't have a lot of control over family issues because that's usually handled in state court and state law. So that's the problem is. So in Texas, we have a law you cannot use something like that to take away a child. A child, you cannot consider whether the parents are affirming them, you know, their delusions. When deciding, you need to, you know, decide on the best interest of the child, whatever is the better parent for the child. And never can the government take your child away because you won't go along with this. Not here. And in most red states, that's the truth, you know. But in the blue states, which is half the states, California, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, all Massachusetts, all those coastal states, and then Illinois and Michigan, a few others. And then the middle of the country is pretty normal, you know. But in those states, yeah, children have been removed from the homes for that reason. And the new administration is trying to do something about it, but it is a lot harder because they don't have the jurisdiction over the individual, you know, family laws that the states have. So I just hope they realize they have to pass something anyway. But the problem is you have all these senators from those states who will veto any legislation that the better senators and what I call the better senators, most of them in red states, they want to stop the seizing of children from their parents, but the rest of the country doesn't. And you may, I don't know if you followed this in the U.S., but you know, as long as we have all this mail-in voting in many of these states, I don't think voting is even trustworthy anymore.
No, it's not.
People need to go to the polls and present an ID, because otherwise you have these industries who are controlling the states like this.
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I had in the show, this show used to be named in a different way, so we start a whole new platform, etc. And I had on the show back in 2021 the co-founder of the Tea Party, and his words were, as long as we have machines in the United States, there will not a single election that you can trust. Those words were enough for me. And unfortunately, and it's very embarrassing, those machines were tried here. Every single election in Venezuela was tried here, and these schemes of scam elections were already tried here. So they are putting in practice what we already practice here.
Yeah.
and it's going to be extremely difficult, but they have to make it in, and we have no time. We have exactly 2 years to make it happen.
Yeah, that's right. It's
two
crazy.
years 2 years. um Last but not least, if someone needs your help, if someone needs you go to, I don't know, to give a speech in a school or something,
Yeah.
how can we reach you?
You can always email either Partners for Ethical Care, which is support@partnersforethicalcare.com, or help@transitionjustice.org. Either of those will get a hold of us.
The emails and the website of Transition Justice will be available in our social media and also in the info box of the show. And from this day on, count on me as an ambassador of this platform. I will be the very first person trying to spread the voice of what you guys do. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because as long as you leave, you need to be told that what you're doing is priceless. Trust me, it's
Thank you so
priceless.
much. That is so nice. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Marta, for being with me today, and I hope I can have you in the show any other time.
Yeah, we'd love to. One and I or one of our detransitioners or anybody, any of our other
Yes.
members would do that too.
Yes, I would love to. So stay tuned, because this conversation isn't over. For now, please make sure to follow us in social media. Everywhere you can find us as Politics for Thinkers in every single social media. We have our website too, politicsforthinkers.com. You can find the email I created for you to get in touch with me. You can find the editorial of the week. You can find my biography or what you need to have about the show. You need to know about the show, and our social media as well, in case you don't find us. Thank you so much for being with us this week. And the promise is to be on this day in 7 days, every Friday, 7 p.m., with new faces. Politics for Thinkers. Thank you so much. God bless us.
Thank you for watching Politics for Thinkers.